Hello, everybody. My name is Arnold. Welcome to the Cherry Hill Seminary podcast. Cherry Hill Seminary serves pagan and nature-based communities by providing high-quality education and empowers students to advance academically and lead spiritually. If you would like to learn more about the degrees, certificates, and courses that we offer, please visit cherryhillseminary.org. That is cherryhillseminary.org. My guest on the show today is Polly Springhorn. Polly is a student of Cherry Hill Seminary in one of the MDiv programs. And from there, I think I will let Polly introduce herself to you for herself. Polly, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're calling from, and your relationship to paganism?
Hi, Arnold. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. I am speaking to you today from Wonder Valley, California, which is in the high desert near 29 Palms. And my relationship to paganism started officially in 1992. That was when I officially converted to Wicca. I became a solitary practitioner. And in 1995, I started taking training from a Gardnerian coven. And I was initiated in 1996, became an elder in 2002. And since 2008, I have led a Gardnerian coven in Oakland, which happens to be one of the oldest Gardnerian covens in the San Francisco Bay Area. And in 2020, during our pandemic quarantine, I started doing some soul searching, as I know a lot of us did, and realized that it was time to stop putting off something always been kind of thinking about, which was becoming a religious scholar. So I applied to Cherry Hill Seminary in November 2020, and I started my coursework in January 2021, and I've been plugging away at my theology and religious history MDiv ever since.
Yeah, the you mentioned the word scholar, and I think pagan scholarship is going to be a big focus of our conversation today. Just generally, what does that mean to be a pagan scholar?
To me, it means applying the principles of higher education to the history and theology of our various paths. I had previously gotten Bachelor of Music and Master of Arts in Music degrees, and I was familiar with music scholarship. So I was sure that through Cherry Hill Seminary, I could learn to study and write about paganism with a similar level of rigor.
Hmm. Have you started your thesis yet?
I've started research for my thesis. I have chosen a topic.
Would you feel comfortable sharing it generally?
Generally, yes, it is going to be about the Victorian occultist and doctor and vegetarian and anti-vivisectionist Anna Kingsford and her spiritual thunderbolts, her particular way of practicing magic.
Mm. That sounds like a wonderful read. And how has your experience in the class been? Your MDiv is in theology and history, which
Yes.
is we have three different MDiv programs, and this is just one route. How is this program sort of different than what you may have studied in like a pastoral counseling kind of MDiv?
Well, I knew I wanted to write and I wanted to study archiving, and that seemed to be the best framework. It was not going to be about ministry and advocacy, and it was not going to be about pastoral care and counseling, although either of those would have been a way to take my high priestesshood to the next level. But it's something that I feel like I've always been good at, and it was a good way to serve the community was to write and present about it and to archive our history.
Mm. And you recently did present at Spirit Northwest. Can you tell us what is Spirit Northwest and what you presented recently?
Sure. This is a brand new pagan conference, and we just had the second one. It was over the last weekend in April in Portland, Oregon. And I had attended the first one in 2025, and I had a really good time. And I presented there. And this time around, the organizers asked me if if we could team up, and in my other role as the Pagan Studies Unit Chair of the American Academy of Religion Western Region, would it would it be good if they could offer my Pagan Studies panel a second opportunity to present their work? So that meant that in addition to presenting at the AAR Western Region annual meeting on March 14th, they also got to present at Spirit Northwest, and we preserved the exact same format so that we could show the Pagan Conference audience what an AAR panel was like. And I'm hoping that as a result of that, other pagans who are of a scholarly bent might be encouraged to get involved with the AAR Western region and maybe become presenters themselves. I feel like it would be a great way for pagans to spread the word about our community, its theology, its history, research that they've done to a wider audience of religious scholars. And I feel like there's an openness and a curiosity there so that we pagans can be taken seriously.
Right. And what did you present on this past conference?
Well, the AAR panel was about paganism, technology, and innovation. And my solo presentation was called Matter Reality in the Charge of the Goddess.
And I'm sure this is probably going to be a task. Could you tell us a little about could you tell us a little about that? Please.
Well, the full title is Matter Reality in the Charge of the Goddess: Bodies, Objects, Places, and Sensations.
Mm.
And what the presentation is about is comparing five different versions that are publicly available of the Charge of the Goddess, which is a very foundational document for the practice of Wicca, and by extension for the whole pagan community, because in the beginning of the pagan movement, everything was loosely, if not tightly, based on Wicca. And then it grew from there.
And the type of research that you're conducting now with Spirit Northwest kind of bleeds into your work that you're currently doing with an organization called the Adocentyn Library. Um, I did some reading on the library before our talk, and it sounds fascinating. I have many questions about it, but can you please explain to the audience what that is and what you do for them?
Well, I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. I moved to the desert pretty recently. And the Bay Area was where I received all my training and where my pagan community came to me, where I came to them, and where we flourished over decades. And two friends of mine, Don Frew and Anna Korn, started the Adocentyn Research Library. And it now has, I believe, 18,000 volumes of everything that could possibly interest pagans. And so that started up some years ago. So And in my capacity at Cherry Hill, thinking about what should I do for a community placement, what should I do for an internship, I immediately thought of the library, and I thought I would propose to Don and Anna, what if I came over there and spent 2 semesters working on protocols and procedures for pagan special collections? And they were in agreement with me. And I brought along a collection that I had inherited from my Wicca teacher, Brendan. And I just spent the next 2 semesters working on organizing it, developing the framework, consulting with other pagan librarians about what special procedures should we create and put in writing for the library that would guide the creation of pagan special collections.
Hmm. You mentioned pagan libraries. Are there many, or pagan librarians? Are there many pagan libraries?
There are a few. There is the New Alexandrian Library, which is in Delaware. And the other one that comes to mind is at Valdosta State University in Georgia. It is not a wholly pagan library, but it is a pagan collection, a pretty large one within that university library.
What might a visitor expect to find at Adocentyn?
Well, they have regular open hours, which are Thursday from 4 to 8 p.m. and Sunday 12 noon to 6 p.m. and other hours by appointment. You'll find an unassuming looking building in the East Bay city of Albany. And upon coming through the front door and the bells jingling, you will see um, the whole collection on the stacks. There's a reading room where all the extras of books that have been donated are there for reading and for sale to benefit the library. And there's another study area where I know that presentations are happening. There's a lecture series, and sometimes there are even classes given.
Right, that was one of the things I saw on the website. It is an active library in the community.
Yes, yes, it is.
And in your work at the library, I'm sure you've had the chance to come across some amazing documents. Are there any documents in this collection that kind of stand out as being especially impressive in your mind?
Yes, yes. Some things pop immediately to mind, like my Wicca mentor, Brendan, kept records of all the weddings he officiated. And some of them were people I knew. And I found some rituals that I had written in his collection, which was very heartwarming. He was known to the local community to be a collector of people's ritual scripts. And I found some of those that went back a long, long way. I've and were written by people I knew. And I saw several issues of newsletters that no longer come out. I saw um, South Bay circles, ritual scripts, and invitations to public rituals, and Bay Area pagan assemblies, all those things that happened kind of in the 90s and the early 2000s when people were flocking to become part of the Bay Area pagan community.
That sounds like amazing work.
It
Um,
was. I really enjoyed it.
in your opinion, what is something that the community at large, the pagan community at large, might miss about research and scholarship? If somebody is going to put a document or a provenance to the test, how rigorous can it be in our community in paganism?
Well, I know a lot of us don't think about that as we are writing up rituals, um, signing names to them. Certainly, if we are not out of the broom closet, maybe we don't want to sign our names to it, or maybe we only use a magical name. Um, there was work by by a witch in the collection, whose name I recognized, but she was not public. And so it was a surprise and a pleasant one to learn that, oh, this person was part of our community, and she's also this famous person. And so in the same way that when a family is doing, family history work, when you don't write on the back of photographs and the people who know who those people are in the photographs pass on, if there's no writing on the back of the photos, you don't know who those people are. So I think that in our community, it's a really good idea to make notes on ritual scripts, to make notes on people's personal handwritten uh, books of shadows or books of mirrors, and make arrangements for them to be donated to a library like Adocentyn or the New Alexandrian Library or the Valdosta State Library, so that our history can be preserved. Because everything seems like it's on the internet right now, but nothing is certain. And to have hard copies, I think, is a really good thing.
Right. That's so important, I think, to preserve our own personal records. I think many people who practice either they don't think about it or it's like a printer paper they just plan on throwing out when they don't need it anymore. It
Mm.
never really crossed my mind, especially because so many of my personal records are digital. It never really crossed my mind that I could actually leave personal documents to a community that might value them.
I guess I'm of a generation that is more used to written records. I've been journaling almost continuously since sixth grade. And that was quite a few decades ago that I started. And it's all longhand, it's all in notebooks, or as I got older, store-bought journals with lines in them. And it's just been a really important part of my life, the hard copy history. And my mom was big into genealogy. And so she took me along with her to go to these historical libraries and look at microfiche and look at slides and reels of microfilm to find out census records and where people were born and where they were buried. So I've got an affinity for pre-digital media.
Yeah, you mentioned the generational difference. How involved or yeah, how involved do you think like Gen, what are they? Z, I believe. The the youngest generation now
I
that
think
is
we've
coming
got
up.
Gen Alpha also. They've
Right, yeah, but they're still kids.
they're still
Uh,
kids, but Gen Z, yeah, they're
yeah,
adults.
right. They would say. And
Mhm.
how have you noticed involvement with or engagement with the younger community? Is the Adocentyn Library getting visitors who seem to lean younger, or is it more the generation who values the ephemera still?
Well, I do know that millennial pagan friends of mine really dig the library. Um, I don't know. All the times I was there, I did not see really young folks visiting,
Hmm.
but I would never rule it out. I'm sure if they found out about it, they'd be into it.
Right, right. That is one thing that is interesting to see too. I mean, there are kids bringing back vinyl records
Uh-huh.
and cassette tapes and Walkmans. So
Yes.
I'm sure the train will come back around with the documents at Adocentyn.
Yes,
Um,
it'll become cool again.
and I'm sure that organization, if anybody was interested, if anybody has documents, especially, where do you think they can send those for Adocentyn at least?
I think you should get in touch through the internet with Don Frew and Anna Korn, and they can give you full details. They know the best way to convey collections to them.
Okay, very cool. And now shifting gears kind of, I know we've talked a lot about your academic experience and expertise, but I am also interested in people who work in the community spiritually. Obviously, that's a big focus of Cherry Hill Seminary. But can you describe your work as a high priestess?
Well, in the Gardnerian tradition, we don't have a central authority, so each coven is autonomous, and it really takes on the flavor of the high priestess who leads it. Gardnerian covens are led by a priestess and or a high priest. Um, the ritual structure is very similar across the Gardnerian tradition. It's a lineaged initiatory tradition, so there are various lines of initiatory descent, all of which trace back in some way to Gerald Gardner. The high priestess is hopefully a benevolent um, dictator whose whose first priority is the spiritual development, the training, the protection, and and service of the coven as a whole, serving the gods, serving the coven, serving the community. I don't know if anybody out there is a fan of Babylon 5, but if you are, you remember when Ambassador Delenn said, "There is no greater honor among my people than to serve." I think I resonate with that really strongly. I want to keep my coven mates safe. I want them to be happy. I want them to be magically powerful. And I want us all to have great relationships with the gods.
I know from personally, but also generally, I think from stories that I've been told, Wicca is one of the first introductions many people have to paganism, like an actual spiritual system, with
Mm,
some kind of structure. I find is Wicca and Gardnerian Wicca. Um, it's just interesting to hear you talk about it as an active and living um, spirituality. Just
mhm,
because I remember it from the books that I used to read 20 something years ago. Uh,
mhm,
and so I think that's something that I think surprised me, just that there are still Wiccan um, groups and spiritualities active today that are being taught as, the history. The history lives, basically.
It does. It really
Wow.
does. And it's, as culture changes, it gets grappled with too,
Mm,
because it can't remain static. It's it was revolutionary when Gerald Gardner started writing about it and started teaching it after he got initiated. It was really revolutionary to have women and men be equal before the gods and to have women be encouraged and assumed to have spiritual authority. Um, it was revolutionary to assume that the as they thought of it at the time, a very gender binary polarity of energies, that these two were equal, that they were complementary, and that combined together were a marvelous, numinous portal to the mysteries. And then fast forward to the 21st century, where we have a revolution in how culture views gender. We don't have gender essentialism like Gerald Gardner assumed we had, and Doreen Valiente. We have gender constructivism now. We can see gender as a social construct. So if you are Gardnerian, you get to grapple with, all right, well, in light of this, what does polarity mean? And there are more fundamentalist Gardnerians who would like to preserve a binary system of gender in magic. And there are inclusive Gardnerians who work with the tradition to align it with a new conception of gender in a way that still works, because my coven is an inclusive Gardnerian coven, and we have a view of our gods that they are pre-gender, that they're beyond gender. So their view of gender is not limited by corporeal existence, and physical fertility is not the only kind of fertility. So there's a lot of room for innovating within the Gardnerian tradition. It doesn't have to remain static.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Just in your experience, poring over and handling all those historical documents, what kinds of shifts you've noticed in the writings or the way people used to consider their language and their magic. I'm sure that I don't know how far. Actually, how far back do those records go?
The records that I was dealing with started in the early 1970s, and they kind of dropped off in the 2010s.
Mm. I would imagine though, because I'm just thinking about all the all the changes that I've seen in my short time on the earth, uh,
Mhm.
and to be able to see those documents, I bet tells a story that is not often talked about because you'd mentioned in your uh, current coven about this kind of I guess a split, or not in your current coven, in your tradition, this split, along ideologies. I mean, I guess how recently have you seen that? How recently in your work as a high priestess have you seen kind of ideologies seeping into the spiritual community? Is that a big thing you have to navigate?
I think the gender binary and the assumption of physical fertility as as a representative of the most profound mystery has always caused some folks to question, well, is it okay to have witches whose lives and whose orientations and whose way of moving through the world is different from that? And really, each time the answer has been no, really, these people are welcome. These people are called by the gods.
Right.
And we just have to learn from that.
Um, well, Polly, I've enjoyed the conversation so far. I think we can start wrapping up, but do you have any closing words for the audience, or if you'd like to share any links or contact information for anybody that we talked about, please.
Be sure and go visit adocentynlibrary.org. That's ADOCENTYN library.org. You can see their whole catalog online. You can peruse and see what all is there, and it'll make you wish you were there. And when you do, just go over there and visit. It will be so much fun. Spirit Northwest will happen in 2027, April 22nd through 25th at the Embassy Suites in Portland, Oregon. Go to spiritnorthwest.com and you can keep up with their calls for vendors, with their calls for presenters, and learn when the room blocks are available. The intrepid organizers are Kanani Soleil and Silent and Courtney Weber. All neat folks and all very devoted to creating community for pagans on the West Coast.
And if anybody is interested in Gardnerian Wicca in real life, does your coven have a web presence or somewhere people can find information on that?
We do not have a web presence like many Gardnerian covens. We're pretty private. Folks are welcome to drop me an email, polly.springhorn@gmail.com.
Okay, and with that, thank you so much, Polly, for joining us on the episode. Thank you so much to the audience for listening. If you found the conversation you just heard to be of value, please consider making a donation at cherryhillseminary.org. And if you'd like to learn more about the degrees, courses, and certificates that we have to offer, please visit cherryhillseminary.org/academics. Until next time, bye.